China moved 1.3 million people to build a dam. United States moved none, but moved a river. China flooded 13 cities and 1,500 villages. America built a new city in the desert to house workers. China built during a period of economic rise. America built during the Great Depression. China aimed for 22,500 megawatts of electricity. America aimed for jobs, survival, and 2,080 megawatts. China's dam slowed Earth's rotation by microseconds. America's dam created Lake Mead, one of the largest reservoirs in the US. One dam controls floods, the other controls droughts. One holds back the Yangtze, a river that shapes dynasties. The other holds back the Colorado, a river that shaped the American West. Three Gorges powers megacities like Shanghai and Chongqing. Hoover electrified Los Angeles and Las Vegas before they were megacities. Three Gorges is made of turbines, concrete, and the absolute will of a state. Hoover is made of concrete, private contractors, and federal authority. One took 17 years to complete. The other claimed 96 lives and took 5 years to build. Two dams, two rivers, two nations, two definitions of a great project. So the question is not which dam is bigger. The question is, what does a civilization choose to control when it builds a dam? Water, nature, destiny, or itself? In the story of the Three Gorges Dam, the origin does not begin with engineers or turbines, but with water, violence, and history. The Yangtze River has flooded for centuries, carving wealth into its banks and death into its villages. In 1931, one flood killed as many as 2 million people. In 1954, another displaced over 10 million. For China, the river was not simply a resource, it was a threat. A reminder that nature could erase a dynasty as easily as a campaign could. Generations of Chinese leaders viewed the Yangtze as both an opportunity and a rival. The idea of taming it, harnessing it, and forcing it to serve the nation moved through political eras like a shadow. Mao Zedong wrote poems about subduing rivers and mountains. He spoke openly about a great dam that would silence the floods. The dream passed from the revolutionary period to the economic reform era. By the 1980s and 1990s, China was shifting from rural poverty toward urban growth, and the Yangtze Valley became the axis of that transformation. Controlling the river meant preventing disasters, projecting power inland, delivering electricity to new industrial zones, and asserting that the new China was not merely a participant in modernization, but an author of it. Meanwhile, in the United States, the origin of the Hoover Dam begins not with floods, but with drought, debt, and a desperate need for order. The American West in the early 20th century was a region yearning for water. The Colorado River carved through 7 states, but its flow did not obey borders, farms, or dreams of expansion. The river flooded violently in spring, then dried into near uselessness by late summer. Farmers wanted the irrigation, cities wanted growth, politicians wanted control. The federal government wanted a reason to extend authority into the West. The Bureau of Reclamation, established in 1902, existed for exactly this purpose: to turn the desert into settlements and the wilderness into farms. Long before the Great Depression, engineers and officials were sketching plans for a massive dam that could stabilize the Colorado, store water for millions, and produce electricity for a region not yet built. The idea traveled through committees, conferences, feasibility studies, and political fights. States along the Colorado feared each other more than they feared nature. Each one worried that another would seize the river first. The Boulder Canyon Project Act of 1928, which authorized the Hoover Dam, was an act of interstate diplomacy, federal ambition, and geographical necessity. China's origin is the story of a rising power confronting its ancient environment. America's origin is the story of a young power trying to impose order on its frontier. Yet both stories revolve around control. For China, control meant reducing the political and human cost of natural disasters while supplying electricity to an economy that was accelerating faster than its grid could handle. Floods were not merely weather events, they were national vulnerabilities. To stop them meant to rewrite the relationship between state and nature. To generate power meant to support the coastal leaps of Shanghai, Jiangsu, Zhejiang, and the industrial awakening of Chongqing and Wuhan. The Three Gorges Dam was born from decades of debate. In the 1950s feasibility studies, in 1970s hydrological assessments, in 1980s debt and reform politics. Environmental scientists warned about ecological collapse. Human rights groups warned about displacement. Strategists warned about earthquake risks. But the dam was still inevitable. It represented an idea larger than cost-benefit analysis. It represented a civilization proving that it could bend nature without being broken by it. The Hoover Dam, by contrast, was born into economic catastrophe. When the stock market crashed in 1929, unemployment spread across the United States. Banks failed, breadlines formed, and the American West, still fragile and underdeveloped, felt especially exposed. Washington was searching for a project that could put men to work, restore confidence, and anchor the West inside the national economy. The dam became that project. It promised tens of thousands of jobs and an industrial region powered by cheap electricity. Los Angeles needed power immediately. Las Vegas and Phoenix would not have become what they are without it. Unlike China, America did not fear floods. It feared stagnation. The political context was just as important. The Hoover Dam asserted federal authority at a time when states resisted Washington's reach. The federal government financed and planned the project, private contractors built it. That combination revealed a core feature of the American system: government as coordinator, private firms as executors, and individual workers as the main characters. Newspapers followed the dam as a story of men, not ministries. Rope-suspended drillers, concrete pourers, desert heat. Photographs of workers clinging to canyon walls and wrestling steel in the sun turned engineering into spectacle. The origin of Hoover is inseparable from the rise of American mass media. The dam was sold to the public as a drama of human will. In China, the Three Gorges Dam was not framed around individuals. It was framed around history. Engineers mattered, but the protagonist was the state. The project was presented as the latest chapter in a hydraulic civilization that had long justified rule through water control, from the Grand Canal to Dujiangyan. Three Gorges was the 20th century continuation of that story, a vast river that had to be tamed, and a modernizing state that needed symbols of destiny. Official narratives describe the dam not just as concrete, but as promise. Safety from floods, prosperity through electricity, unity through a shared achievement. America's origin story had no such civilizational arc. The United States did not see itself as inheriting ancient engineering traditions. It saw itself as a frontier experiment. The Hoover Dam reflected the American ideal of progress through innovation, capitalism, and federal intervention when necessary. It showed that the country could build at scale even during crisis, a bold answer to an immediate problem, not a ritual to fulfill a 1,000-year destiny. Its roots lie in modernity, not antiquity. Yet geopolitics threads through both stories. For China, the Yangtze runs through the heartland, feeding cities and factories, but also fueling fears of vulnerability. A catastrophic failure could devastate Wuhan, Nanjing, or Shanghai. Controlling the Yangtze means controlling the interior. For the United States, the Colorado River cuts through a geography of scarcity. 7 states, and eventually Mexico, depend on it. Water rights turned into a battlefield where legal frameworks replaced armies. Building Hoover was as much about settling claims and establishing federal supremacy as it was about power generation. In short, the origin of Hoover is diplomatic. The origin of Three Gorges is hydrological and ideological. Both origins share one final commonality: timing. Great projects appear not when they are convenient, but when they are necessary. The Hoover Dam emerged when America needed work, power, and cohesion. The Three Gorges Dam emerged when China needed electricity, flood control, and global recognition. In both cases, the dams answered questions larger than technology. What kind of country will we become? Whom will we protect? How will we assert control over our environment? For China, the environment was water. For the United States, it was the desert. China built to secure the future of a civilization shaped by rivers. America built to unlock the future of a civilization shaped by land. One began with floods, one began with drought. China did not approach the Three Gorges Dam as a construction project. It approached it as a national mandate. A construction project is about budgets and schedules. A mandate is about purpose and legitimacy. In the late 20th century, China's cities were expanding, factories multiplying, and power demand outgrowing the grid. Hydropower offered large-scale electricity without imported oil or coal soot. The Yangtze, with its steep drop and massive flow, was a natural engine. To turn that engine on, the state had to organize relocation, financing, engineering, political persuasion, and environmental management in a single campaign. The first challenge was people, not concrete. To fill the reservoir, China moved 1.3 million residents from towns and villages that had existed for generations. Resettlement combined compensation, coercion, and narrative. Some families received money and improved housing, others felt underpaid and uprooted. Local officials enforced deadlines, national media framed departure as sacrifice for a project that would save future lives and fuel national rise. New towns had to be built, farmland reassigned, graves relocated, services rebuilt. The process exposed both the state's ability to mobilize and its limited tolerance for dissent. Complaints surfaced, but the project never stopped. The second challenge was engineering. Three Gorges combines a concrete gravity dam, spillways, and an enormous hydropower station. Dozens of giant turbines, many based on imported designs that were later domestically produced, demanded precision manufacturing and installation. The pattern, import, absorb, scale, echoed China's broader industrial strategy. Hydrology added constraints: heavy sediment, seasonal flows, and seismic risk. Modeling and staging took time. The nearly two-decade build-out did not reflect weak will. It reflected a difficult landscape. Ambition had to be layered over caution, but always with the assumption that completion was non-negotiable. In the United States, execution followed a different script. The federal government hired, the private sector built. 6 major firms formed a consortium called Six Companies, winning the contract by promising speed and cost control under federal supervision. The government created Boulder City to house workers and families. Instead of relocating existing communities, America pulled in labor from around the country. Men arrived willingly during the Great Depression, fleeing joblessness for desert wages. The workforce was diverse yet stratified. White skilled laborers higher up the hierarchy, Black and Mexican workers often at the bottom, performing the most dangerous tasks. Execution revealed not only industrial capacity, but the social order of 1930s America. The technical problem was heat. A single solid block of concrete large enough for the dam would have taken a century to cool and cracked apart. Engineers poured the structure in interlocking blocks, threaded them with cooling pipes, and pumped cold water through to carry off heat. It was a solution born from experiment, improvisation, and relentless testing. The worksite was lethal by modern standards. Men dangling from ropes, inhaling dust, collapsing from heat stroke, dying in falls and cave-ins. Safety rules existed, but reflected the norms of their time. Hoover's construction became a testament to both ingenuity and brutality. In China, execution was fused with environmental justification. Three Gorges was built to generate power and control floods, so spillways and floodgates were designed for extreme events, not typical days. Sediment, landslides, fish migration, and seismic risks were studied, but when trade-offs emerged, national benefit outweighed local ecology. The logic was civilizational. Displace a million now to save millions later, except ecological damage for energy security. Whether that logic is right is a moral question. For execution, it was a guiding principle. In America, environmental concerns were peripheral during construction. The ecological consequences, altered sediment, changed water temperatures, damaged delta wetlands in Mexico, only entered serious discussion decades later. The priority in the 1930s was recovery, not ecosystems. Execution delivered immediate and visible benefits, while costs emerged slowly and out of sight. Over time, the Three Gorges project became a training ground. China started with foreign turbine partners and ended by exporting hydropower technology abroad. Engineers who learned on Three Gorges later worked on dams in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Execution turned into expertise, expertise turned into influence. Hoover produced a different legacy, a model of how federal planning and private execution could combine. It taught Washington how to coordinate at scale and taught corporations how to profit inside that framework. Execution, on both sides, was less about concrete and more about building systems. Labor, financing, and coordination all exposed the underlying operating systems. China organized labor through the state, emphasizing sacrifice and unity, closing space for open protest. America treated labor as a political actor, with unions, negotiations, and media stories about working conditions. China financed Three Gorges through state-backed loans and bonds, prioritizing integration and security over strict financial return. America funded Hoover federally and repaid costs through power sales, treating the dam as an investment. Coordination in China flowed downward in a hierarchy. In America, it spread across a network of agencies, states, firms, and utilities. Three Gorges was executed through authority, Hoover was executed through alignment. When the Three Gorges Dam began storing water and sending electricity into the grid, its effects spread far beyond the reservoir. Hydropower from the Yangtze helps drive factories, ports, and cities across central and eastern China. Industrial clusters around Shanghai, the Yangtze Delta, and inland hubs like Chongqing drew on its power. The dam did not simply generate megawatts, it stitched together regions into a single infrastructural system. Flood control changed seasonal life along the river. Before, summer floods repeatedly devastated towns and farmland. After, water levels became more manageable, at least in typical years. Policymakers gained stability, residents gained some predictability. Yet hydrologists warned that dams do not erase risk, they move it. Sediment built up in the reservoir. Wetlands and downstream ecosystems received less nourishment. The Yangtze, once a wild axis of Chinese history, came to resemble more of a managed utility. Ecological consequences multiplied. Ancient species like the Yangtze sturgeon lost habitats. Landslides along the reservoir's slopes revealed how changing water levels could destabilize terrain. Each impact represented a trade: macro stability for micro disruption. Supporters argued that the social and economic benefits justified the damage. Critics argued that lost ecosystems and cultural sites could never be recovered. Economically and diplomatically, the dam became part of China's outward reach. Engineers and firms that cut their teeth on Three Gorges went on to build dams in Ethiopia, Pakistan, Laos, and beyond. Hydropower equipment, financing packages, and project management became exports. Infrastructure turned into a language of foreign policy. A country that builds dams at home began shaping the rivers of other countries. Socially, the relocation legacy persisted. The 1.3 million people who left the valley did not vanish. They formed new communities, sometimes with better opportunities, sometimes with lingering resentment. Submerged temples, towns, and archaeological sites deepen the tension between memory and development. For some, Three Gorges proved China could now do what only great powers do. For others, it proved that progress can erase as well as build. For Hoover, the consequences unfolded differently. Lake Mead's reservoir allowed the American West to grow beyond what its climate would naturally support. Cheap electricity energized Southern California's industries, lit Las Vegas's casinos, and cooled millions of homes across Arizona and Nevada. An inhospitable region became a network of cities and farms. The dam transformed a desert into a platform for modern life. Water storage turned legal agreements into physical reality. The Colorado River Compact's allocations were suddenly backed by concrete. Over time, water politics became a layered negotiation among states, tribal nations, cities, and farmers. Drought in the 21st century pushed these negotiations toward crisis. Stability had created dependency, dependency made shortages painful. Ecologically, the Colorado's delta withered as less water reached the sea. Sediment that once rebuilt beaches and wetlands remained trapped behind the dam. Downstream ecosystems changed quietly, while cities flourished upstream. The social story tilted toward opportunity rather than displacement. Workers came to the West for Hoover jobs, settled in company towns, and then stayed, altering demographics for generations. Yet the project also recorded racial and class hierarchies that would echo in later civil rights debates. Culturally, Hoover became part of American myth-making, proof that a democracy could still build grandly in hard times. It showed up in posters, newsreels, and schoolbooks as a monument to human daring and technical skill. For tourists, it became a place to touch that myth physically. As climate shifted, new consequences emerged. Lake Mead's extended decline in the 2000s and 2010s turned Hoover into a symbol of precarious abundance. If the river continued to weaken, the cities and farms it sustained would face hard decisions. In China, extreme rains tested Three Gorges' flood logic. Opening spillways protected the dam, but reminded downstream communities that no engineering solution can fully outrun changing climate patterns. Both dams, built for stability, found themselves challenged by instability. Energy transitions added another layer. Hydropower, once central, now competes with solar, wind, gas, and nuclear. The dams remain iconic, but no longer singular. They anchor systems that must evolve beyond them. Their deeper consequence may be this. They show that major infrastructure is built for one era, but inherited by another. As decades passed, the Hoover Dam and the Three Gorges Dam slipped into the background of everyday life. Cities, farms, and factories downstream grew on the quiet assumption that rivers would be managed and the lights would stay on. The dams felt permanent, but permanence was an illusion. Rivers shifted, climates warmed, societies changed around the concrete. For China, Three Gorges became a benchmark of state capacity. Proof that the country could move people, bend landscapes, and power a new industrial age. Its logic extended into high-speed rail, megabridges, and overseas projects. The dam turned from a single structure into a credential. China was not just developing, it was building the world. Hoover aged into a different symbol. It became a monument to an earlier American chapter when federal ambition and engineering bravado poured into rock and steel. In a later, more digital America, the dam looked almost like a relic. Yet drought and a shrinking Lake Mead pulled it back into the present, turning Hoover into a warning as much as a triumph. Climate volatility binds their futures together. Both dams now operate in conditions their designers never fully imagined. Both anchor regions that must learn not only how to control nature, but how to adapt to it. Each dam reflects a national story, one of frontier improvisation, one of centralized will, and both stories are still being rewritten. So the question is no longer just how long these dams will last or how much power they can still produce. The deeper question is, when civilizations try to control nature, are they truly shaping the future or only buying time before the river takes the pen back? If you want to follow more stories like this, where the United States and China are placed side by side in their ideas, their ambitions, and their definitions of greatness, consider subscribing to the channel. There are many more comparisons ahead, and each one reveals a different way these two civilizations shape the future.